Have you ever spent hours working on something and felt incredibly productive, only to realize later that you barely moved any closer to your goal? Maybe you've watched dozens of tutorials before starting a project, highlighted every page of a textbook without remembering much, or spent an entire afternoon organizing your workspace instead of actually doing the work. Strangely, your brain often rewards these activities with the feeling that you're making real progress. But why? The answer lies in a fascinating psychological phenomenon known as the effort heuristic. This mental shortcut causes us to believe that something is more valuable, more effective, or more meaningful simply because it required more effort. It's one of the hidden reasons we confuse being busy with being productive, and understanding it can completely change how you work, study, and make decisions. Your brain evolved to make quick judgments instead of carefully analyzing every situation. Thousands of years ago, this saved energy and increased survival. If gathering food required hours of climbing, searching, and hunting, the reward was probably valuable. If building a shelter demanded days of labor, it was likely worth protecting. Over time, the brain learned an incredibly simple rule. If something requires a lot of effort, it must be important. In many situations, this shortcut worked remarkably well. But in today's world, where information, technology, and digital tools allow smart work instead of hard work, this ancient shortcut can become surprisingly misleading. Imagine two students preparing for an exam. One studies efficiently for 2 focused hours using active recall and practice questions. The other spends 8 hours rewriting notes in different colors, decorating pages, and reading the same chapters repeatedly. At the end of the day, the second student often feels far more confident simply because the experience felt harder. Yet research consistently shows that efficient learning techniques usually outperform passive repetition. The brain isn't measuring effectiveness, it's measuring effort. That's why exhausting work can feel productive even when it isn't. The same illusion appears almost everywhere. People often trust expensive products because they assume more money means higher quality. They admire complicated explanations over simple ones because complexity feels like expertise. They believe difficult workouts are always more effective than balanced training. They even judge advice differently depending on how much sacrifice seems to be involved. Effort becomes a signal that something has value, even when there is little evidence that it actually does. Psychologists have observed this bias in countless experiments. Participants frequently rate artwork as more valuable when they believe the artist spent many hours creating it, even if identical pieces were actually produced quickly. Handmade products are often viewed as superior simply because people imagine the labor behind them. The object hasn't changed, but our perception has. The story of effort changes how the brain evaluates reality. This explains why many people become trapped in routines that look productive from the outside, but deliver very little progress. They answer every email immediately, attend unnecessary meetings, endlessly tweak small details, or constantly switch between tasks. Each action requires mental energy, so the brain records it as meaningful work. But movement isn't the same as progress. A spinning wheel on a treadmill works incredibly hard, yet it never moves forward. One reason this illusion feels so convincing is because effort activates our emotional reward system. When we overcome difficulty, the brain releases chemicals associated with achievement and satisfaction. Unfortunately, those feelings don't guarantee that the goal itself was advanced. Sometimes we feel accomplished simply because we struggled, not because we succeeded. The struggle becomes the reward. Think about assembling a piece of furniture. If the instructions are confusing and the process takes 4 frustrating hours, people often end up valuing the finished table more than someone who bought the exact same table already assembled. Psychologists call this the IKEA effect, a related phenomenon showing that personal effort increases emotional attachment. While this can make us appreciate our own work, it can also make us overestimate its quality. The effort heuristic also affects decision-making in subtle ways. Imagine reading 2 articles explaining the same scientific concept. One uses clear language and simple examples. The other is filled with technical jargon and long, complicated sentences. Many readers automatically assume the second article is more intelligent simply because it's harder to understand. Yet true expertise often simplifies complexity rather than hiding behind it. As Albert Einstein reportedly suggested, If you can't explain something simply, you may not understand it well enough. Simplicity is often the result of mastery, not a lack of it. This bias influences careers too. Employees sometimes stay late at the office, not because extra hours improve results, but because visible effort is mistaken for dedication. Meanwhile, someone who finishes high-quality work efficiently may appear less committed simply because they don't look busy. Modern workplaces often reward appearances of effort more than actual outcomes. Social media has amplified this illusion. Productivity videos filled with elaborate morning routines, endless planners, color-coded calendars, and perfectly organized desks create the impression that success requires constant visible effort. Yet many successful people quietly focus on a few important tasks instead of performing productivity. The difference isn't how hard they appear to work. It's how intentionally they direct their attention. The good news is that once you recognize this mental shortcut, you can begin questioning it. Instead of asking, "How hard did this feel?" ask, "What measurable result did this create?" Replace the feeling of busyness with evidence of progress. Instead of counting hours, count meaningful outcomes. Instead of admiring complexity, look for clarity. Instead of assuming the hardest path is the best path, ask whether there's a smarter one. This doesn't mean effort has no value. Some goals genuinely require persistence, discipline, and long periods of hard work. Learning a musical instrument, training for a marathon, conducting scientific research, or mastering a profession all demand real effort. The key difference is that effort should serve progress, not replace it. Hard work remains powerful when it's directed toward effective methods rather than simply making tasks more difficult. One of the most surprising lessons from psychology is that the brain often relies on feelings as shortcuts for truth. If something feels difficult, it must be valuable. If something feels easy, it must be less important. But reality doesn't always work that way. The most effective solution is sometimes the simplest one. The best explanation is often the clearest. The fastest route is occasionally the smartest. Intelligence isn't always about doing more. Sometimes it's about removing everything unnecessary. So the next time you finish a long day feeling exhausted, pause for a moment before celebrating the effort alone. Ask yourself a different question. Did today's work actually move me closer to my goal? Or did it simply convince my brain that I had been productive because it felt difficult? That single question can expose one of the brain's oldest shortcuts and help you replace the illusion of progress with the real thing. Your brain is incredibly powerful, but like every powerful system, it occasionally mistakes effort for effectiveness. Once you learn to see that illusion, you gain the ability to work with your mind instead of being quietly guided by one of its oldest psychological shortcuts.